Hello everyone. Welcome to the session on awareness of social identities. Take a moment to ask yourself the following questions. What situation am I in at the moment? Are there other people present in the situation? Is their presence in some way influencing me? What aspect of myself am I aware of when I interact with them? Now, take a moment to jot down your response. Did it cover any of the following aspects? Gender, ethnicity, race, caste community, social class, occupation, educational level, nationality, region, language and dialect, religion, spirituality, sexual orientation, ability, disability, and so on. Were there some aspects of yourself that were easier for you to become aware of than others? Did it make you feel significant or insignificant? Did it make you feel distinct and unique? If you answered yes to this, you have tapped into a crucial facet of yourself, namely your social identity. The idea of social identities is based on a fundamental assumption that we all belong to various social groups. As mentioned before, some of these groups are more obvious than others. Some are universal, while others are rooted in specific cultural contexts. These groups not only provide a framework for us to exist within, but also makes us feel significant and valued. Much is already known and written about social identity, and hence this brief e-module is meant to be a roadmap to explore some questions. What is meant by social identity? What is the relevance of these identities in crucial areas of our lives? What implications does it have for mental health professionals? Let's address the first question. One of the first steps towards developing a social identity is understanding that it has its roots in personal identity. We have a need to define ourselves and develop a self-concept consistent with our traits, abilities, and achievements. One's identity, however, is by no means a flat, one-dimensional personal experience. As John Turner, a pioneer in the social identity approach, puts it, the social identity approach forces psychologists to turn their heads towards the social world. This makes our identity not only more social but also multidimensional. What does this mean? For instance, my occupational identity as a professor will be influenced in turn by other dimensions of myself. That is, whether I am male or female, young or older, Christian, Buddhist or Hindu, middle class or an elite upper class. This is the first characteristic of our social identity. The characteristic of multidimensionality, or what some scholars refer to as intersectionality. In order to understand what this means, it is important to examine how the salience of particular aspects of our identity vary according to our context and experiences. Let's try another exercise. Complete the STEM, I am, using as many descriptors as you can think of in 60 seconds. Chances are that you use some trait descriptions like honest, friendly, helpful, etc. Social psychologists have, however, noticed a curious phenomenon. Some individuals hardly tend to describe themselves by certain identities, for example, their ethnic identity or their sexual orientation, while others tend to usually mention these specific aspects of their identity. Women usually mention being female, while men usually do not mention their maleness. Gays, lesbians, or bisexuals who are comfortable about revealing their sexual orientation usually mention it, while heterosexuals rarely include their heterosexuality in their list of social identities. What do these examples say about our social identity? That it is relative to the social status of one's reference group. If one is a member of a dominant or advantaged social group, that social identity may not be usually mentioned. Thus, according to scholars like Tatum, the parts of our identity are those that people notice and that reflect back to us. The aspect of identity that is the target of others' attention and subsequently of our own often is that which sets us apart as exceptional or other in their eyes. There are, of course, other characteristics of social identity. The question that needs to be asked is, how does it impact us? Of course, researchers argue that awareness of one's social identity may not be uniformly universal. For instance, cross-cultural findings by Marcus and Kitayama and subsequent studies point towards the conclusion that people from educated middle-class groups in North America and Western Europe tend to use more individual attributes such as smart, competitive, helpful, and so on, while those in other parts of the world mention more relational descriptions in terms of social roles and identities. Let's now examine the second question and look at a few research findings in the context of health. There is a close link between social identity and well-being in a range of social and clinical groups. Take, for instance, a study by Cole, Kemeny, and Taylor that demonstrated the progress of HIV among gay men. They found that the progression of HIV was significantly faster among those members of this group who were sensitive to rejection on the basis of their inability to sustain particular social identities. A similar finding by St. Clair and Hay found that heightening elderly individuals' social identity of being elderly can often make them accentuate their appraisal of age-related symptoms like hearing loss. Similar findings have been reported by Levine and Ricker when female athletes appraised their knee injury as more serious and requiring medical attention when they self-categorized as sports students rather than women. Hence, social identity can often moderate the experience of certain symptoms. Now, finally, let's move on to our last question. How do findings like this impact us as mental health professionals? For your understanding, I've simplified this to three aspects, namely, clients' and therapists' perceptions of their social identities, similarities and differences between clients' and therapists' social identities, and health-related social capital based on shared social identities. By now, we've discussed the idea of how we need to understand people and specifically our clients not merely in terms of their demographic variables, for example, religion. Thus, social identity processes do not lead to merely descriptive categories that influence our perception of being unique in our social world. Also, the salience of one's social identity could impact clients' behaviors and their health responses, such as help-seeking behavior and the way they appraise their symptomatology. Thus, a mental health professional may consider asking the client about their various social identities and which ones are most central for them. This may be helpful for clients to reflect on and understand how their emotions, thoughts, and behaviors may be impacted by their salient social identities. When mental health professionals and clients perceive that they share a sense of social identity, that is, each understands the other to be one of us and hence like me, rather than one of them and not like me, the therapeutic alliance is much more effective. Of course, One does not have to have the same social identity as the client, but recent research shows that empathy, interpersonal sensitivity, understanding the client's problems do go a long way in providing social support. Moreover, therapists' willingness to discuss differences in social identities between themselves and their clients and acknowledgement of any privileged identities that they have can also further support therapeutic alliance. This refers to how patients can fall back on social support that they identify strongly with. Social identity has a positive effect on work and life satisfaction because it serves as a basis for effective social support from in-group members such as one's work colleagues or family. This idea is supported by correlational studies among hospital patients recovering from heart attacks and professional groups exposed to work-related stressors like bomb disposal experts and bar staff. In a similar line of research, clients who have multiple social identities are less likely to develop depression in the context of life events such as starting university, having a stroke, or experiencing brain trauma. Thus, social identities, provided they are positive, roughly translate into social support systems. Social identity-based support groups help individuals from lower status stigmatized groups cope with the stigma of their condition, example bipolar depression or high-functioning autism, by perceiving themselves as resourceful and thus rejecting negative stereotypes of themselves and arriving at a more positive view of themselves and their potential. There is a need to explore how various evidence-based therapies compare in establishing social connectedness through shared social identities. This further highlights how interventions can be designed to maintain or increase individuals' sense of shared social identity, especially one that is positive, and this might in turn enhance the well-being and mental functioning of vulnerable groups. A last point that I'd like to mention is how the behavior of health professionals depends on how they identify with the norms of their professional group. For instance, there is definitely a difference between the social identities that young novice professionals have as compared to older experienced professionals. The focus of their services may be different, as in the case of junior nurses who focus more on patient-focused care delivery as against profession-focused instrumentality among senior nurses. How might this apply to mental health professionals like us? And would there be generational differences between mental health professionals, say, who were trained 20 years and more recent graduates, in the kind of social identities that they bring to a therapeutic session? If so, in what ways would they differ? For a deeper understanding of all these issues and interesting findings, I recommend that you go through an extensive review on social identity published by these authors. I hope that this video has given you an overview of the role of social identities in various day-to-day contexts and how, as mental health professionals, we are both challenged by and sensitized to our own as well as our clients' social identities. Thank you for watching this video.